Well, welcome to April's reading recap. I cannot believe how fast this year has been going by. I just can't keep up with the time. It's just crazy how fast things have been flying by. I can also not believe how much I read in April. I am really surprised by how much I read in April. Usually 4 to 5 books is my better month, and this month I read 6. I'm gonna actually blame that on meeting 2 authors in person this month. So I met Sharon Cameron and Ruta Sepetys in person at a live indie bookstore meet and greet event, which was absolutely amazing, and they had such amazing counsel, and it was just so great to talk to them. But I ended up buying 3 of their books, and I binge read them because they were so good. But more into that later. I will get into each book as I go through chronologically all the books that I read in April. So let's dive in. First book I read was The Vanished. I felt like Cara was the perfect person to write this book with her background and her schooling, and she really made this an immersive story. I will say though, I felt like it wasn't very suspenseful for a suspense novel, and maybe that was just the cover that was influencing me to feel like it was supposed to be really suspenseful. The cover itself makes it look like it's like a thriller and dark and really fast-paced, and I didn't really feel like it was any of that. I mean, it did get into that at some point. Like 3/4 of the way through, it was more of a suspense and more high action and fast-paced. But for the most part, I felt like it was just like a really strong contemporary story. The threads with all the paintings and tying it all together was really interesting. And I did also really love Carter's interactions and relationships with Andrew. It was just so cute and sweet. The next book I read was very long, which makes me really surprised that I got through all of these books in 1 month, because this was no fast read. The Huntress by Kate Quinn. I have read a couple of her World War II novels, and she is just a really solid World War II writer, just a solid writer in general. I really enjoy her novels, so I was excited to pick up this story and get into it. It's just such a fascinating concept, and I just love all the different threads she ties together with all the different POVs. Just the idea of women night bombers in the Soviet Union during World War II is just such a fascinating story, and she just did such a neat job tying it all together. There's just such a fascinating realm of characters, from the women night bombers to an undercover murderess to Nazi hunters trekking across Europe and then America searching for this woman who murdered somebody that they loved in the war. It's just such a fascinating story, and she just has so many neat elements of the story that it really keeps you turning pages to see how they all collide, because it's one of those stories where there's so many different POVs and you just have no idea how they all work together, but you know that they are going to work together. It was one of those stories. The one thing I didn't really love, and why I probably wouldn't recommend it to a ton of people, is just I didn't love Nina's relationship with Yelena. Though it did build on Nina's character arc later on, I felt like having them as lovers it made that sisterhood aspect of the night bombers kind of die. It was just not my favorite aspect of the story. There was a plot thread that did carry on through multiple chapters and have moments later on. I just didn't feel like it added a ton to the story. It would have been just as strong without it. I generally just don't read stories that have those elements. It also had a lot of language, so I might be a little bit wary of recommending this book to most people. But when you get past all of those things, the actual plot of the story was just so fascinating, and all the different characters and twists. She's just a really good writer, and I just love getting into all those different POVs and seeing how they all tie together. Right after that, I ended up meeting 2 fabulous authors, Ruta Sepetys and Sharon Cameron. I've never actually heard of Ruta Sepetys until that moment, which is so disappointing in myself. Like, how did I miss that? She is just such an amazing author. This is the first time I've ever heard of her, ever seen any of her stuff, and I met her in person, and we had a great chat, and I loved talking to her, and I ended up buying 2 of her books afterwards. She's an amazing author. She is, like, so good. How have I not heard of her before? How have I not read her stuff before? It did not take me very long to read her books that I bought, and I really wish that I could have bought more. But alas, budgets. I think every reader relates to that moment. I read Beyond Shades of Grey. This book is so good. She was sharing a bit about how it's based off of her family story with Lithuania and the Siberian camps, and it's just such a cool story. Her books are really neat because they're written for more of a YA audience, but they still have that really immersive historical aspect, which I really appreciate, because it's really hard to find YA historical. It's not even really a genre, it feels like. Honestly, ever since I was in my early teens, I've just been reading adult historical fiction or adult fiction because there just isn't much YA that appeals to me. So it's really cool to see how she is writing for a younger audience, and with that desire to really bring stories to life and share the truth about things that happened, specifically in history. And Between Shades of Grey was no different. It was just such a well-written story, so immersive, so interesting, and I read it in a day. That's probably why my book count for the month was a lot higher. Reading a book in the day is so much fun, but it just takes a really good book, and this was a really good book. Right after that, I was on a Brutus Sepetys high, so I read the next book that I bought from her. This was the last book I bought from her, which now I'm really disappointed in myself because I really wish I could have bought more, but I couldn't. It was a really good book too. I've been thinking about this for weeks after. It was just so well written and so fascinating. Let me just be honest here, I didn't actually read any of the back cover blurbs when I bought the books. I just really appreciated the authors and they just looked cool. I mean, they talked a little bit about their books when we were talking, and so I knew generally, very, very generally, what the stories were about. No idea what this was about. I totally thought it was World War II. And then I started reading, and no, it is not World War II, it's 1989, which is such a fascinating time period because we don't read historical fiction like that. I don't think historical fiction really exists much for more modern times like that. So having a story that has that really unique historical feel, but feels very modern, is just such a unique twist. No different from her previous book, this was so well researched, so immersive. It just has such a neat take on the communist regime in Romania not very long ago, and the Romanian Revolution. It's a story about betrayal, about informers, people are always watching their back, and the epilogue, oh my goodness, that just grips you and kind of makes you a little bit freaked out. It was just so well written, and the really neat thing is just that it is a YA story. You can feel the YA through the story, it's really interesting because I read so much adult fiction, but there is a difference there with the YA versus adult fiction, and she just does an amazing job crafting this story to really be gripping, but also awesome for more of a teenage audience. That said, it's not all light and fluffy, and it doesn't dilute things. It is just a really, really well-researched, very immersive, well-written, amazing book. So, could we top that book this month? I don't know. Yep, I actually did top that book this month. I read Bluebird. This actually might have made the cut for favorite book of the year. I know it's only May. I think I read my favorite book of the year in April. It was that good. It's about the daughter of a Nazi right after the German regime fell apart and crumbled, and she's just trying to figure out what's true. It's so interesting because in that time period, so many of the young Germans that were brought up in this time were just raised on propaganda. So as everything she believed to be true is all falling apart, she's really having to discover what truth is, and in that she's discovering things about her father, who turns out to be a Nazi concentration camp doctor. And instead of wanting to find him and wanting to reunite her family, she knows that she has to stop him before he continues his experiments on others. It was just such a fast-paced, really well-written, really immersive, interesting story. I love all the emotions there. The characters are so good. It was just really, really, really good. I love this story. I was thinking about this story also for a long time afterwards. It's just one of those stories that just sticks with you, and you just feel those emotions, and you feel that gravity and the pain that she went through in all of this as she's just trying to discover what's true and trying to figure out how to resume her life, but also sacrifice her life for the good of others. It was just a really, really, really good book. That was Bluebird by Sharon Cameron. And then lastly, I read Walking on Hidden Wings, which is a little bit of a roaring 20s mystery. I always love stories that have multiple POVs, and this one had a dual timeline aspect, which I really enjoyed, and it just kept me flipping pages to kind of figure out what was going on, where was the truth. I feel like I keep reading stories about truth and trying to discover the truth. And this one did have a bit of a truth aspect as well, where one of the characters is supposedly dead from a plane crash, and his wife is accused of sabotaging the plane and being the reason why he's dead. So it's a bit of a murder mystery about a woman wing walker and her determination to discover the truth. And so those were all the books that I read in April. I'm still a little bit shocked that I've gone through so many books in April. I can't believe I read that much in April. May is not turning out that good, so it was probably a one and done thing. But there were so many amazing good reads in April. I would highly recommend, specifically the books by Ruta Sepetys and Sharon Cameron. They're both just such sweet ladies, so generous of their time, and it was just wonderful to be able to talk to them and get some encouragement on my writing and the process that I'm in currently, and their books were so good. Like, there's this major stamp of approval on them. There's a reason they're New York Times bestselling authors. Their books were amazing, and I highly recommend them if you like historical fiction that's really, really immersive and well-researched. If you've read any interesting books this month, I'd love to hear about them. So make sure to drop a comment in the comment section below, and we can discuss some of the books that you read. I'd love to hear more about them. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again soon.